Peter M. Marzano, MD, is a board-certified internal medicine specialist caring for patients at his practice, Osceola Care Specialist, located on West Oak Street in Kissimmee, in affiliation with the Osceola Regional Medical Center. Dr. Marzano has received his medical degree from the American University of the Caribbean School of Medicine in 1997 and his internship and residency at Memorial Health University Medical Center in Savannah, Georgia. Dr. Marzano has been practicing for over 20 years, and his philosophy is to always put the patient first. Welcome, Dr. Marzano. The show is yours.
Thank you, everybody. Welcome. So I'm one of the new GME core faculty at Osceola Regional Medical Center and with UCF's residency program for internal medicines. I recently came from Cleveland Clinic in Vero Beach, where I was on faculty with Florida State University. Now I've kind of shifted and ramped it up to teach the residents, which are a little more advanced than the students. Anyway, I'm new in town. I've been here since January, and today I'm going to talk to you about positive life skills for diabetes. I'm happy to field questions at any time so just shoot the chat. There's a chat at the bottom of your screen as mentioned. I'm going to put the slides up now. All right, so welcome everybody. As I said, this is going to be positive life skills for diabetics. I've been an adjunct professor at UCF since 2016 and affiliated with the college since 2009 when they first opened. So on we go. So we'll talk about diabetes today. Diabetes is a massive epidemic in this country. If you haven't seen it in the news, as of now, 30.3 million Americans have type 2 diabetes. I'm going to mostly speak about type 2 diabetes. That's the adult onset diabetes. There's two types of diabetes. There's type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is usually the juvenile onset where the insulin secretion from the pancreas completely fails, and we can touch on that if you guys want. But the bulk of the patients in this country are type 2 diabetics. You'll see on the slide only 1.2 million are type 1. The rest are type 2. Interestingly, going back to 1960, in 1960 in the United States, less than 1% of the American population had type 2 diabetes. We're now up to 9.4%. They expect by 2030 that number will blossom to about 18 to 20%. It is an epidemic way worse than coronavirus could ever wish to be, and it affects every person is a potential diabetic in this country, regardless of race, age, sex. It spans across every sector of this country. What is type 2 diabetes? So again, I mentioned there's two types of diabetes, type 1, type 2. We're going to focus on type 2. The problem with type 2 diabetes is the main problem is insulin resistance. So I'm going to digress and talk about physiology for a second, but I'll kind of make it as simple as possible. Your pancreas is a little organ that kind of sits below your stomach, right under your breastbone. That makes insulin. Insulin grabs the sugar that we eat, all the sugar, all the carbohydrates. A carbohydrate is a sugar. Typically in nutrition nomenclature, carbohydrate, they mean a longer chain, and a sugar they would refer to as a shorter chain sugar, but all carbohydrates are sugar. So your pancreas makes insulin. The insulin grabs the sugar molecule and that insulin molecule together drive into the cell, and that sugar molecule is delivered to this little thing in your cell called the mitochondria, and it's basically processed that way. And then the mitochondria makes if you go way back to your high school biology, the mitochondria makes ATP, and the byproduct is CO2 and water. So largely a type 2 diabetic, the pancreas is working fine. You make plenty of insulin. The problem is the cell door is locked and you can't get that insulin molecule into the cell. It's called insulin resistance. There's a lot of theories as to why it happens, but if you put it in a practical sense, if you think of the pancreas as the Ford truck factory, the truck factory is working fine. You got a lot of trucks. The sugar goes in the bed of the truck and it drives in the cell. The cell garage doors are locked. So one of the keys to treating diabetes is unlocking the cell door. So why do the cell doors get locked? Because from the time we're born in this country, we basically get slammed with way more sugar than we ever intended to be able to process. Going back to 1800, the average, these stats come from England mostly. In 1800 in England, they consumed 22 grams of sugars per day. As of 1900, we're up to 112 grams. Now we eat 190 grams of sugar a day. Our body only needs 39.7 grams of sugar to function in a normal capacity. So you can see we're eating exponentially more sugar than we actually need. So all this bombarding of your cells with sugar, the cells get tired of it and they lock the garage door. So one of the key to treatments is try to unlock the garage door, and I'll talk about that. So you can see on this slide, the body resists insulin. As I was explaining, the garage doors basically get locked. It is a chronic condition. Type 2 diabetes, we are seeing it in younger and younger people every day. We used to say, oh, it's typically over 30. I began practicing in 2000. So in 2000, we'd say, oh, yeah, over 30 is about when you get it. We are now seeing 13 and 14-year-olds with type 2 diabetes, and our blood tests help you determine if you have type 1 or type 2, but largely the clinical presentation, you usually don't need the antibodies to diagnose type 1 or type 2 in the teenagers. The way they present is totally different. The type 1 diabetic absolutely collapses, and it's a medical emergency. That's usually how the child or teenager presents. The adult, the type 2 diabetic presents a little bit differently, with a lot of urination, a lot of thirst. But we are seeing type 2 diabetes now even into the mid-teenage years, which was unheard of even 20 years ago when I started practicing. Again, it's largely our diet. There's certainly a genetic predisposition, but it's largely our diet. It's diet choices that start right from what your mom's feeding you when you're 2 years old. It's also our increasing sedentary activity, like take this pandemic. I'm broadcasting. You can see I'm broadcasting from my home, and welcome to my home, by the way. We're sitting around more and more. Even my day as a doctor, when I started 20 years ago, I was on my feet probably 10 hours a day, and I do 2 hours of paperwork. Now I'm in front of a screen probably 10 hours a day and walking around the hospital or exam rooms for 2 hours a day. It's so shifted, and the little or no activity, the less activity we have, the less calories we need, the less sugar we need, right? If we're sitting around more, we don't need as much sugar. So even that stat of we only need 39.7 grams of sugar a day to function, that may actually be a little bit less now because we sit more. So, and then certainly this problem is a positive feedback loop. Once insulin resistance starts for whatever reason, whether it's bombarding your body with sugar or little or no physical activity, and that obesity chain starts, it's a positive feedback loop. So you get a little bit of insulin resistance, and it just gets worse and worse as time goes on. It's very, very difficult to undo that once you get the obesity part of the equation thrown in there. Incidentally, in 2030, 85% of the American population will have a BMI over 25, which is considered overweight. As of now, 39.4% of the population is considered obese, which is a BMI of 30 or above. So this all goes hand in hand. Obesity, diabetes, it all fits right together. So can we prevent this? Absolutely. And if you think logically about what I said, no activity and poor diet choices. So how do we prevent diabetes? We do the exact opposite, right? You're going to want to burn every calorie you can get, make those cells absolutely starve for sugar. Sugar is our body's gasoline. Your body requires two things for your cells to function. It requires oxygen and it requires sugar. So if you can now you don't want to make your body starve for oxygen, that would be very detrimental. But if you make your cells starve for sugar, it has to unlock the garage door, right? So exercise is probably the absolute foundation of preventing diabetes and maintaining a proper weight. I'll go into this a little bit more. The other one is good diet choices, and we'll talk about the diet choices coming up a little bit. As I mentioned earlier, you have way too much processed food in your diet and processed sugars. When you read a food label, the food industry is largely, I don't like to think they're doing it intentionally, but they largely mislead you even when they put the labels on there. So when you look at a food label, the back of a whatever, everything has nutritional labels on. So when you look at a nutritional label, it's going to say carbohydrates, and then down there, then under a few lines underneath, it'll say fiber, and then it'll say sugars. So by sugars, they mean just a short chain carbohydrate. By total carbohydrate, they mean a complex carb, which is a longer chain, so it takes the body longer to chew it up, basically. So you want to favor your complex carbs over the simple carbs. Generally speaking, whatever you're eating should say less than 9 grams of sugar per serving, and you should only have one serving, by the way. We'll talk about serving sizes in a second. Complex carbs are good for you. It takes your body a little bit longer to digest them. You don't get that insulin spike. So when you eat a carbohydrate, when you eat something, a signal comes from your brain and tells the body, hey, pancreas, get ready to send out some pickup trucks, to send out some insulin molecules, because we're getting a delivery, we're getting a load of sugar. Well, so if you eat a candy bar, which is a lot of simple sugar, your brain gets really lit up, sends signals down. So your insulin secretion is usually a little more than's needed. You get a big blast, a big insulin spike. Complex carb, a longer chain carb, won't really do that. It gives you more of instead of a peak, it gives you more of a hill. Instead of a mountain, it gives you more of a hill as far as your insulin secretion goes. So you want to favor complex carbs over simple carbs. What are complex carbs? Whole grains. Brown is good in general. So brown rice, brown bread, sweet potatoes, those are all complex carbs. White rice is more of a simple sugar. The perfect food is actually black beans and rice if you use brown rice, because brown rice has the husk on it, so it's more of a complex carb. It has more protein in it, and it's a longer chain sugar. When they strip the husk off the rice and make it white rice, it just really turns it into a simple carb, and it's not nearly as good for you. In fact, it's arguably not good for you. But if you have black beans and brown rice, great combination. I'm sitting close to a window, so if you hear the rain, I apologize. We're getting pelted. I'm here in Brevard County. I reside in Melbourne, Florida, so I'm talking to you from Melbourne. The other question I get a lot from diabetics is, can I eat fruit? The answer to that is absolutely. You can eat fruit. Fruit is good for you in a million ways. Like everything in life, keep it in moderation. A little bit of fruit is a good thing. A lot of fruit, probably not a good thing. And why can you eat fruit? Because if you eat the whole fruit, it has fiber in it. Fiber is a complex carb. So although you do get an insulin spike, because fruit generally is a shorter chain sugar, that fiber helps mitigate the insulin surge. So a couple, 2-3 pieces of fruit a day is perfectly fine. Fruit juice is terrible for you. There's no fiber in fruit juice. It is simple sugar. Your sugars will spike. Not a good thing. An apple, banana, an orange, those are great fruits to have. Again, in moderation, 2 to 3 a day is perfectly fine. Moving on, I alluded to activity. Make those cells, all the cells in your body starve for sugar, so they unlock the door, and you can get the sugar into the cell. So any movement is good movement. Walk, but if you're going to walk with a purpose. Walking generally doesn't burn a whole lot of calories unless you're speed walking or walking with intention. You want to keep that walk to around a mile in 15 minutes or less. So a brisk walk. Weights are fantastic, and then cardiovascular training, which would be like the rowing machine, bicycles, jogging. I'm going to take a second and digress and talk a little bit about weights. Weight training has been found specifically in type 2 diabetics. Weight training is superior to cardiovascular training. So cardiovascular training is exactly what it sounds like, cardiovascular. It's good for your heart, your lungs, and your blood vessels. That's it. It will help your sugars a little bit. Weight training, so they did a study about a decade ago. I spent about 10 years of my life in sports medicine, just a slight digression. I was the team doctor for Florida Institute of Technology for 7 years, which is here in Melbourne. I worked with the Washington Nationals for 7 years as one of their spring training docs. And then I was kind of the backup guy during the season. I got to do a couple series, which was fun. And then I also done a lot of work with local high schools. So I've got a big background. At one point in my career, sports medicine was probably about 25, 30% of my practice. So, and personally, I'm very involved in nutrition and fitness as an interest. So going back to this study with weight training, they looked at a diabetic population, and the question you want to ask yourself when you're exercising, why do you exercise? So you exercise to raise your metabolic rate, right? Your metabolic rate is the rate at which your body processes calories and burns calories. So people talk about they desire to make money passively, make money while I sleep. Well, you want to burn calories while you're sleeping, right? So the average person, when they're sitting around the house, like what I'm going to do most of today and working from home, I'm going to burn around 70 calories an hour just sitting on my desk or my couch. If you take an NFL defensive back, these guys that have the Adonis figure, the perfect, 3% body fat, really, really super fit guys, or Usain Bolt, the track star, they have about 3% body fat. They burn roughly 140 calories an hour at rest because they have more muscle mass. So within, I alluded to this earlier, within your muscle cells, you have something called mitochondria. Mitochondria is the factory within the cell that processes our sugar. So the more muscle cells you have, the more mitochondria you have. So therefore, the higher your resting metabolic rate. So with that being said, they looked at this, they did this study it's about a decade old now. They took two groups of people, they were age and sex matched. So it was an even distribution. They had one group run for an hour and a half and one group lift weight. They looked at the diabetic population, and long story short, the weightlifters had a resting metabolic rate that remained above baseline for 36 hours after they were done with their workout, compared to 4 hours with the runners. That's why weightlifting is so fantastic if you have diabetes. You're going to add muscle mass over time. It takes, now if you lift weights today, don't expect to see a benefit tomorrow. It's going to take at least 8 to 12 weeks before you see a change in your body composition. But keep at it, don't give up. But you will burn more calories and make those cells starve for that sugar much more efficiently if you incorporate weight training into your program. Cardiovascular is good: running, walking, jogging, cycling. Those are fantastic. Swimming, but they're good for just that, your heart and lungs. So do that, but throw weights into your diabetic training routine. And any movement is good movement, I always say. I mean, if you can park further away, if you're only if your office is one or two stories above, take the stairs, don't take the elevator. All these things will help your diabetes if you are in fact a diabetic. And like I say, if you're not a diabetic, sadly, statistically, it's probably looming. Again, they say 18% of the population will have diabetes by 2030. So if you do make good food choices, and I'll talk a little bit more about the food choices, and you add exercise every day into your routine, the weight will peel away and your diabetes will improve and arguably go away. I've seen multiple patients, their diabetes goes away with due diligence. They've got to work hard though. So I'm just flipping through my slides here. So certain ways to do this are, let me talk about diet now. I'm going to shift gears and go on to diet. So what is a good diet for a diabetic? So typically you want to, the fats you have, and you want to do a ratio roughly if you're diabetic. You want to do 40-40-20. So 40% of your carbs, 40% of your diet should be carbohydrate, 40% should be protein, and then 20% should be fat. And of the fat, 80% or more should be the good fat, meaning polyunsaturated, mono or polyunsaturated. Total caloric content, how much do you want to have? That's really going to depend on your activity level, your height, your genetic makeup. But generally speaking, for a woman, you want to eat between 1,400 and 2,200 calories a day. For a man, you want between 2,000 and 3,000 calories. Again, depending on your activity. For a construction worker, you're going to want more in the 3,000 to 3,200 calories for a male. If you're desk sedentary, 2,000 is probably sufficient. So you've got to titrate that. And there are ways we could calculate that for you, but it really is individual. When I was working with the sports teams, both the Nationals and the FIT, we would tailor the diets not just to the sport, but to the actual athlete. We do their body mass composition and really tailor their diet, especially at the professional level. These guys really are told exactly what to eat and do almost every second of the day. At least they were. I stopped doing that in about 2012. Up until then. So future directions, where do you want to go with this? If you do in fact have diabetes, start today. You can work out at home. That's what I'm going to be forced to do. Most of us are going to do. You could do simple things like push-ups against your countertop. That lifts 43% of your body weight. A good old-fashioned Marine push-up lifts about 92% of your body weight. What else can you do? Non-weighted squats, stand in front of your chair, make your rear end touch the chair, stand up, shoot for around 50 a day. Any exercise is a good exercise. So the more you can make your body starve for those calories and starve for that glucose, the better your diabetes will be. With that, I'll kind of wind up and just field questions if you guys have any.
I'll ask a question, doctor. So, we're going through coronavirus, and diabetes appears to be one of the top three. Obesity is the biggest factor, I guess, for mortality rate associated, but then diabetes is one of the top three. So those probably are related, but can you talk to that?
Yeah. And you guys mentioned that earlier. I'm sorry, I forgot. The storm and everything threw me for a little bit of a loop, threw me off my game. But Yes. So when you have diabetes, you obviously, assuming the rest of your immune system is functioning normally, what high sugars do to your blood cells? It's easy if I just make it in a lay term. You have your white blood cells, but high sugars basically make your blood cells drunk. So they're there, but they don't know what to do, and they don't know where to go, and they don't know what to do if in fact they do get there. So your immune system, with elevated sugars, your immune system is impaired. Even though you're walking around normally and you feel fine, you basically have a low grade your immune system is compromised. I don't want to use the word deficiency, but because again, you have the cells, you have the antibodies, you have the ability to make the antibodies, but the elevated sugars really make the white blood cells drunk. They just don't know where to go and don't know what to do when they get there. That's the easiest thing. So, and we see this, the focus now is on coronavirus, but we know, and we've known for as long as I've been around medicine, that diabetics are more susceptible to every infection, sinusitis, pneumonia. You guys hear all the time they get cellulitis to their legs, and that's why they lose toes and feet and limbs, unfortunately, because that's got a lot to do with they lose their nerve sensation as well. But it's not just the nerve sensation, because even if you couldn't feel it, there are disorders out there where people, their nerves don't function, but the rest of them is fine. They heal quickly because their immune system. So you may not feel the wound, and that's going to impair you a bit, but their immune system works fine. The diabetics, we know, if you think outside of Corona and just think of the friends you've known that have had diabetes, they all get in more infections than we do, and they always have, and unfortunately, they always will. It's just because, again, the easiest way to term is the white blood cells are kind of drunk. They just don't know what to do. They don't work right. So that's why, and you're seeing it blown up right now with the coronavirus, because the entire world is focused on coronavirus. But really, diabetic is susceptible to infections in general, virus, bacteria, period. So hopefully that answers it.
I think so. Appreciate it. So obviously, diabetics have a lot more work to do, monitoring their blood sugars and the testing and stuff. So, and then insulin shots to supplement. But you said some folks, if they're diligent, can reduce their diabetes. So does that mean, is there a point of no return, at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we get back, so my general thing that I tell patients, if you throw it on the ground and it grows, you can eat it. If it doesn't grow, don't eat it. Potato chip doesn't grow, don't eat it. You've just got to watch your caloric intake. Right now, the average American consumes 3,600 calories a day, and that's the average. So you have people out there eating way more than that, not so many eating way less than that, compared to a post-World War II diet where the average male, unfortunately, they studied males because they were mostly Army GIs that got out of World War II. Just post-World War II, 1946, 1947, the average American male consumed 1,918 calories. Now we're consuming 3,600 calories. 1 pound is 3,200 calories. So another statistic, the average American consumes 700 calories per day just from liquids. And that's ridiculous. Liquids were never meant to be a meal source. They were never meant to be a food source. When we evolved, liquids are for hydration only. So the only thing that should ever pass through your lips, water, unsweet tea, or black coffee. That's really all you should drink. If you're drinking anything with solute in it and calories in it, that's really not what we're meant to do. So you can do the quick math. If we're consuming 700 calories a day just from liquids, we're gaining a pound and we're gaining a pound and a half a week just from liquids. So yes, really it starts with paying absolute strict attention to your diet. We don't eat as many things as we think we eat. We each eat about 60 different types of food. Your 60 is going to be different than my 60. But once you learn the language of what you're eating, it really becomes easy. I'm a perfect example. I eat a peanut butter and jelly every day. I've done it since I was a kid. It's on whole grain bread. It's smashed fruit. It's pretty healthy. I know that's 300 calories. I had to look it up probably 5 or 6 times till it got in my thick brain. But now I look at a peanut butter and jelly and I know. So it's all accountability. It all boils down to how much did I take in and did I burn that off? And with that theory, throw it on the ground and it grows. You can eat it. If it doesn't, don't eat it. And what have I taken in and what have I burned today? You can keep diabetes away forever with that adage.
But if you have it and you're on insulin shots, is there a point you can ever come back, or is there always hope that you
No,
can reform?
no, you can definitely get off it. But the task, the longer you have diabetes and the more, so insulin, the problem with insulin shots, once you get on insulin, without Olympian effort, you're going to be on more insulin down the road because you're bombarding those cells with more insulin molecules, and the garage door gets more and more locked. So once you start insulin shots, your insulin resistance from the cellular level goes up. So you've got to work that much harder to overcome it, but you absolutely can overcome it. It's just you really, really have to make an Olympian effort once you get on insulin. Starting on insulin, now this is for type 2. Type 1 is different. They need insulin. It's a totally different story. A type 2 diabetic, insulin is an absolute last resort for a doc. And if your doc, if they say, oh, you're new diabetic, here, start taking insulin, I would get a second opinion for sure. There are so many medications now that can sensitize your cells, like a lot of these metformin, glucophage, which you guys are probably very familiar with. If anybody out there is a diabetic, that's an insulin sensitizer that helps unlock the garage door, or unlock the cell membrane, allow the insulin into the cell. So once you are on insulin, yes, you can absolutely come down on the requirement and come off it, but it does take more effort than if you weren't on it.
So, so I'm Catholic, and we just
Mm-hmm.
finished the Lenten season where Catholics usually sacrifice some. So I went on a strict water diet.
Perfect.
Well, I mean, I had food, but as far as liquids,
Right.
that's the only thing I drank. But I've already started having maybe a soda on this day. Not every day, but how does that's obviously just a full cleanse for 6 weeks of Lent, and then we get closer to the holidays. We're leading up to Lent, and I gorge to say, well, I got 6 weeks of cleanse. So how might that look on a chart or from your perspective?
Hopefully you saw a little bit of a weight loss with your water diet, and that's a phenomenal thing. Now, so a soda, I don't drink. I mean, I don't say never is not true, but I rarely drink soda. It's about I think a can of Coke's 140 calories, and I think it's got roughly 27 grams of carbs in it, and all simple sugars. So what I would say to that is just keep your due diligence. If you normally have 3 cans a day and you're on Lent, so you've been used to water now for 6 weeks, maybe add a can back for a pleasure. I can understand that, but maybe not go back to your 3 cans. Just keep it to a minimum. And let me say one thing about diet soda. Diet soda is 10 times worse for you than regular soda. If you're going to have a soda, have a regular soda. The reason being, the artificial sweeteners, and I forget what, I'll say the yellow packet, the pink packet, and the blue packet. I forget which brands they are, but you get the idea. Ounce for ounce, those range from 6 to 10 times sweeter than an ounce of sugar, natural sugar. So as I talked about earlier, if you have a Diet Coke on an empty stomach, your brain gets a signal and it's 6 times stronger. So it goes, wow, you're about to get a monumental load of calories. So you get a massive insulin secretion. You've got all this insulin running around, but there's no calories in the diet soda. So your insulin's running around your bloodstream and sends a signal back to the brain and says, hey, what do you mean? You told me we were getting a monumental load of sugar and I can't find any. The brain says back to it, well, you guys must have messed up. So secrete more insulin. You get a secondary insulin surge. That's what makes you so hungry, where you just go, okay, I got to pull in 7-Eleven, just grab whatever I can grab. And you grab that donut or a bag of chips. And we've all had that sensation where you're just so profoundly hungry. So that's what diet foods, all diet foods that use artificial sweeteners, do to you if you have them on an empty stomach. So I would caution against diet soda on an empty stomach. If you are going to have diet soda, at least have it with a meal so your body's not tricked and it does find some calories. You're still going to get a bigger surge of insulin from the pancreas than you need with the diet soda. But so I would say minimize the soda. If you have to have a soda, a regular soda, and again, I would try to keep to your Lent diet. Adhere to water, black coffee, unsweet tea.
So, so it's not necessarily, okay, 6 weeks and you can spend the rest of the year gorging. It's still almost a day-by-day factory
It is
production,
a day-by-day thing. People talk about the whole paleo diet, and it makes me laugh. You've probably heard that term, paleo diet. The life expectancy of a caveman was 18 years. So we don't really know if the paleo diet works long-term. They didn't live long enough. So, but generally speaking, that diet it focuses way too much on saturated fat. But if you can keep the thinking, eating like I'd actually say eat like an 1860s farmer. the natural wheat, the cow that they killed in their backyard that ate only grass, didn't get all the antibiotics. If you can think about like an 1860s or a turn of the century farmer in America and eat like he eats or his family ate, you're probably in a good state. And to that point, they really only had water, coffee, and then I guess homemade beer, which we could talk about alcohol separately, but that's again, in moderation, it's okay. It actually makes your sugars go down short term, makes them go up long term. But
so I know we have some questions that I'll let the audience participate now.
Sure.
So appreciate the conversation we've had.
Yeah.
But as I get into those questions, the other thing I might say, you said talk like an or eat like an 1860s farmer, but that could be very expensive and limited, right? I mean,
Yes.
so while that may be ideal, or if you have kids, right?
Yes.
I mean, I've got an 18-month-old who already is starting to like the things that we don't feed her. So,
right.
So I just don't know if you have a practical suggestion as I get to some of these questions here.
Sure. So you're right. Eating organic, eating naturally is extremely, extremely expensive. I would just say do the best you can. And the easiest thing is what kind of you alluded to. Water is free for the most part. You can find free water. Even McDonald's, you can ask for a cup of water. But if you can just eliminate the calories coming from liquid, you're going to be 700 calories to the good on average. So if you could just start there, that's a good choice. And all of us, like, at a birthday, I have a piece of cake. I don't profess to eat perfectly, but I eat accountably. I know what I'm putting in. So I would just say keep the accountability.
Very good. Christina, do you want to come up and ask some of your questions? And then there's one from Rachel in the chat. So I don't know if you can see the chat, Doctor, or if Christina can start asking some of the questions she has.
Yes. So you can go ahead and answer Rachel's question since we were talking about drinks, because she asked if other sugar-free drinks have the same impact, like flavored sparkling waters and that sort of thing.
Yes, they do. Probably not to the kick that some of the artificial, like the Diet Coke. Diet Coke has more. I forget which one is in it, but I'll just say Splenda for an example. The Diet Coke has more Splenda in it than the water, the flavored waters. But anything with an artificial sugar has roughly the same effect. Just the artificial or the flavored waters have less of it, so you get less of an insulin surge. But the theory still applies. Now, if you need taste in your water, what I usually do is I'll squirt lemon, lime, or throw a cucumber in there. As natural as possible. So that's a way to get around it. If you have to have the bottled water, you could carry a little lemon, squirt the lemon in it, and that gets you your flavor without getting you that surge. But anything, like when you get into reading labels. If you read the label, and it says anything, if it's water, it should say water. If it says anything else, it's probably going to stimulate a little insulin spike.
Okay, so I was messaged a couple questions. One is, I'm hypoglycemic, which actually I am too, or I was when I was a kid. I don't know if I still am. And try to control it. The cravings for sugar and carbs sometimes are insane. What is a good method to cure that crave?
So what makes people feel full is fat and protein. Fat, protein, and fiber. So to your point, if you're hypoglycemic, a couple things. If you're truly hypoglycemic, that's a precursor to type 2 diabetes. The statistic, I'm not going to count to the exact, but 70% of you guys will become diabetic within 5 to 7 years. That's the rough statistic. So be careful of that, because that's looming, because that's already showing pancreatic dysfunction. Your pancreas isn't secreting normally to a sugar load. So that's the beginnings of type 2 diabetes. You do, when I was talking about your factory, the pancreas is a pickup, the pickup truck factory. And I said, you have plenty of pickup trucks. It does make the pickup trucks. Not every pickup truck is perfect. So you do get a little bit of pancreatic dysfunction. So hypoglycemia predisposes you to diabetes, because it already shows that you've got some insulin receptivity and some pancreatic dysfunction already. So with that being said, to answer your question, look at complex carbohydrates. The longer chain sugar, the better. Like, again, we'll liken it to whole grain bread. If it says whole wheat bread in the store, that's a big lie. They take white bread and they dye it. And it's not. It's got to say whole grain and look at the fiber content. You want it to be 3 to 4 grams of fiber per slice or more. So how do you mitigate your cravings for hypoglycemia? Bulk up on more protein. That'll make you feel full. Complex carbohydrates, not simple. Because if you keep feeding yourself simple sugar, you're getting hypoglycemia, getting symptomatic. You pull in 7-Eleven, you grab a Snickers bar, that's going to spike your sugars, and an hour later, you're going to be starving again, or an hour and a half, 90 minutes later. So grab a complex carb. So if you have to absolutely grab something junk food wise, Sun chips are a little bit better than a regular chip. Sun chips have some fiber in it, and they're more complex carbs as opposed to Ruffles plain potato chips. Again, Sun chips are a bad choice, but they're the best of the bad choices. But try to bulk up on protein, throw in some polyunsaturated fat, and then the longest chain sugar you can have should control your hunger cravings.
On the subject of hypoglycemia, like this wasn't my question, but I was diagnosed with that as a child, but I've never heard a doctor say anything about it since. So is that something that goes away?
Yeah, the diagnosis of hypoglycemia is really actually tricky to make. There's a subset of people that have true hypoglycemia. Sometimes you just get a reactive hypoglycemia, and it can go away if you have it in childhood, but it's often misdiagnosed, especially in a pediatric population. But yeah, you can certainly outgrow it with a better diet, with an improved diet. You can help your pancreas regulate itself, so to speak. Yes.
Okay, and then the other question we received was, my dad is a 3rd generation type 2 diabetic, not insulin dependent yet. He had a pacemaker put in 2 months ago. What is a good exercise for him?
2 months ago, so his pec muscle is still probably healing a little bit, so he probably doesn't want to go bench press or anything like that. But I would say, well, I'd have questions to that. So what was this pacemaker put in for? I mean, atrial fibrillation, heart block. So depending on that situation, so let's assume he can exercise and there's no restriction on exercise. So for the moment, I'd avoid upper body exercises for at least another 6 to 8 weeks and allow that pec muscle to get to about 12 weeks before you really want to push your pectoralis muscle, because they're put in the upper left chest. Number one. So he can start certainly by brisk walking. Cycling's phenomenal. And I know that I talked about those being catabolic exercises, but they're still good for you. So that makes his body starve for sugar. So yeah, get out there and brisk walk. If the brisk walking is good, go to a light jog. And then remember, you have a zillion muscles from below the nipples. So he doesn't have to use his pecs. He can do squats. He can do core strengthening like planks. He can do plyometrics like toe taps and box jumps and things like that. So really any exercise is good exercise. If I were him, I'd start with basically unweighted squats, body weight squats. I'd start with brisk walking, and I'd build from there. And I'd certainly work on core strength. Right now, I mean, I could digress and talk about how we've evolved to have a very flawed spine, and core strengthening is a key problem for most Americans. Our back is pretty weak. So I'd have him focus on core strengthening and then lower body exercises until his pectoralis and chest muscles have healed sufficiently to allow him to do upper body exercises.
Okay, that was it for the questions I received.
Okay.
I was gonna just recommend that if anyone's looking for a nice 1860s meal, head on over to Cindy's.
Cindy Lewis, our executive vice president. Yeah, she's. We're all going to her house in Armageddon because she can take care of it all. She got a little ranch in Lake County. I guess we've exhausted some of the questions from the audience, but you talked earlier. So just I guess for clarification, each day your body's basically a factory. What goes in and then what comes out, and so. You're really looking at those 3,000 calories. Michael, the swimmer,
Michael Phelps.
Phelps, thank you. He would have like 10,000 calories. So if you're burning it, you need more. But is there a way that you can't necessarily cheat it by diluting it? So if I have that soda but an extra glass of water, is that cheating it?
No, because you still got the calories. You got great hydration there, and that's fantastic. But you still got the calories. So at the end of the day, there's a really quick formula. There's a really complex formula, but there's a cheat to it. If you want to see what your ideal calorie content is, take 25 calories per kilogram body weight. So you got to do it in kilograms. In the hospital and stuff, we think in kilos more than we think in pounds. But what is 1 pound is 2.2 kilos, I think. But if you did 25 calories per your weight in kilos, that's what you should. should take in is Google ideal body weight for a 5'10" male. It'll give you that weight, put it in kilos, and go 25 times the ideal body weight. And that's what you should be eating to eventually get down to that weight.
And there's a lot of good apps. Lose It app I've used in the past that'll do those calculations and track your calorie intake too, which are I found very helpful when I was really focused on that stuff.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. It's all about accountability.
Well, I don't see any further questions from the audience. So if you have any parting thoughts or anything you want to share here as we close up.
No, I'd say I'm happy to be at Osceola. I hope to end my career here. I'd like to work with the residents about another 10 years. So come on over to Oak Street and see us if you need a new doc, and we'll take good care of you. And just be accountable for what you put in. Make sure you burn it off.
Great. Well, we appreciate you, Dr. Marzana. We appreciate Osceola Regional Medical Center for sponsoring this, and we appreciate Susan's Courtside. And again, this is your community, so everybody listen in. You got a good doctor, you got a good restaurant, you got a great hospital, so let's support them. Stay safe, stay healthy, and for now, stay distant.